I never believed the stories people told about Black Ridge Mountain. Most locals in western Montana treated that place like it was cursed. Hunters avoided it. Hikers stayed off the old logging roads after sunset. Even gas station workers would go quiet if you mentioned the abandoned cabins scattered through the forest. I thought it was all exaggerated nonsense until October of 2023. My name's Trevor, and this happened when I was 28. I rented a mountain cabin for 3 nights after going through a rough breakup. I wanted silence, cold weather, and no people around me. The cabin I found online was cheap because it sat almost 30 miles away from the nearest town. The owner emailed me instructions instead of meeting in person. That should have been my first warning. The road up Black Ridge was narrow and muddy. Pine trees crowded both sides, so tightly that my headlights barely reached beyond them. By the time I arrived, the sun was already dropping behind the mountains. The cabin looked older than the photos online. The wood siding was faded gray, and the porch sagged slightly on one side. There were no neighboring cabins in sight, just endless forest and heavy silence. Inside smelled like wet wood and smoke. There was one bedroom, a small kitchen, and an old stone fireplace. No Wi-Fi, barely any phone signal. Perfect. At first everything felt peaceful. I cooked canned soup, drank whiskey, and sat near the fire while rain hammered the roof. Around 10 p.m., I heard something outside. Footsteps, slow crunching sounds in the gravel near the porch. I froze. At first I figured it was an animal, but the steps were too steady, too human. Crunch, crunch, crunch. They circled the cabin once, then stopped directly outside the living room window. I stared toward the curtains, waiting to see a silhouette. Nothing. After about 30 seconds, the footsteps moved away into the trees. I barely slept that night. The next morning, I convinced myself I'd imagined it. Maybe stress, maybe alcohol. I spent the day hiking around the area trying to relax. That's when I found the first strange thing. About half a mile from the cabin, hidden behind thick trees, sat another cabin. Except this one looked abandoned for years. Its windows were shattered. The roof had partially collapsed. Rusted tools were scattered around outside. I almost turned back immediately, but curiosity got the better of me. Inside, the place was wrecked. Mold covered the walls. Furniture was overturned. But what really bothered me were the photographs nailed beside the fireplace. Dozens of them. Every photo showed different people standing outside cabins on Black Ridge Mountain. Families, couples, hunters, and every single face had been scratched out. I felt sick looking at them. Then I noticed something worse. One of the photos was recent, very recent. It showed my rental cabin. My truck was parked outside. The photo had been taken sometime after I arrived. I remember my stomach instantly dropping. I grabbed the picture and looked closer. Whoever took it had been standing in the trees watching the cabin. Watching me. That's when I heard movement upstairs. A loud thud. I spun around so fast I nearly slipped. The second floor had no railing left, just darkness leading upward. I stood there listening hard. Another sound. A floorboard creaked above me. Someone was in that cabin with me. I ran out immediately. I didn't even look back until I reached my truck. I locked the doors and sat there breathing heavily, trying to think logically. Maybe it was another hiker. Maybe some homeless guy was staying there. But deep down I knew something felt wrong. Really wrong. I drove back to my cabin intending to pack my stuff and leave before dark. When I got back, the front door was open. I was positive I'd locked it. At first I stayed inside the truck, debating whether to call the police, but there was barely enough signal to send a text. Eventually I forced myself out and grabbed the tire iron from the back seat. The cabin was silent when I entered. Too silent. My backpack had been moved from the couch onto the kitchen table, and written across the fog bathroom mirror were the words, "You shouldn't have gone there." I felt every hair on my arm stand up. I searched the cabin room by room, but nobody was there. That's when I heard the knock. 3 slow taps on the front door. Not loud, almost calm. I stepped toward the window carefully and pulled the curtain back a few inches. A man stood outside, tall, thin, wearing an old dark raincoat. His face was hidden beneath the hood. He wasn't moving, just standing there. Then he slowly lifted one arm and pointed toward the woods behind the cabin. I stared for maybe 2 seconds before the porch light suddenly went out. The entire cabin went dark. I backed away from the window so fast I knocked over a chair. Outside I could still barely see his silhouette standing there through the rain. Then he started walking toward the door, slowly, not rushing, like he already knew I couldn't escape. The doorknob rattled once, then again harder. I grabbed the tire iron tighter while my heart slammed against my ribs. "Go away," I shouted. The rattling stopped. For a moment there was only rain and wind outside. Then I heard his voice, low, calm, almost emotionless. "You saw the house." I didn't answer. "You shouldn't have gone inside." A second later, something heavy slammed against the door. The entire frame shook. Another slam hit harder. I ran to the back of the cabin, unlocked the rear door, and sprinted into the woods without even grabbing my keys. The rain soaked me instantly. Branches whipped against my face while I stumbled downhill through darkness. I could hear him behind me, not running, walking. That somehow terrified me more. Every few seconds I'd hear branches crack somewhere behind the trees, letting me know he was still following. After about 10 minutes, I saw lights ahead through the forest. Another cabin, smaller than mine, but occupied. I rushed onto the porch and pounded on the door. An older man opened, holding a shotgun. He looked terrified the second he saw me. "Please," I said, "someone's following me." The man pulled me inside immediately and locked the door. His name was Walter Green. He'd lived on Black Ridge for almost 40 years. The moment I described the tall man in the raincoat, Walter's face turned pale. He asked me one question. "Did you find the old logging cabin?" I nodded. Walter cursed under his breath and sat down heavily. Then he told me something I'll never forget. Years earlier, a groundskeeper named Curtis Vane had lived on the mountain. According to locals, he became obsessed with the cabins after his family disappeared during a winter storm. People said the isolation broke his mind. At first, he just wandered the woods. Then visitors started vanishing. A couple disappeared in 2011. 2 hunters vanished in 2017. Police searched the mountain multiple times, but never found enough evidence to arrest anyone. Walter believed Curtis still lived somewhere deep in the forest, watching the cabins, watching people, collecting photographs. While Walter talked, I noticed something outside his window, a figure standing near the trees. Raincoat, watching the cabin. Walter saw it too. Without hesitation, he grabbed the shotgun and fired once through the window. The figure disappeared instantly into the darkness. That should have made me feel safer. Instead, Walter suddenly looked nervous. "Get downstairs," he whispered. "What?" "He never comes this close." That's when we heard footsteps on the roof. Heavy dragging sounds moved slowly overhead. Walter shut off every light in the cabin. We sat in darkness listening. The footsteps stopped directly above us. Then came scratching. Long, slow scratching against the ceiling. I could barely breathe. Walter kept the shotgun aimed upward while whispering, "Don't make noise." The scratching continued for almost 5 minutes. Then silence. A horrible silence. Suddenly a loud crash exploded upstairs. A window had shattered. Walter ran for the staircase while I followed behind him. The bedroom window was broken open. Rain poured inside, but nobody was there. At least that's what I thought. Then Walter looked toward the closet. The door was slightly open. Before either of us could react, the closet door burst outward, and a man lunged at Walter, holding a hunting knife. Everything happened insanely fast. Walter fired once. The blast deafened me. The man stumbled backward into the wall, but somehow stayed standing. For the first time I saw his face clearly. Sunken eyes, gray skin. A twisted smile stretched across his face even after being shot. Then he ran straight through the broken window into the storm. Walter wanted to chase him, but I stopped him. We stayed locked inside until sunrise. The next morning, police finally reached the mountain. They searched the woods behind Walter's cabin and found something buried beneath leaves and dirt. Photographs. Hundreds of them. Some are decades old. Others were recent. Mine was there too. But the worst part wasn't the photos. It was the fresh footprints leading deeper into the forest. Only one set, meaning Curtis survived the shotgun blast. Police never found him. Walter moved away 3 months later. The rental cabin was demolished in early 2024. But sometimes late at night, I still think about one detail that makes my skin crawl. In my photograph, I wasn't standing alone near the cabin. Someone was barely visible behind me between the trees, watching me before I ever noticed him. This happened in northern Montana in October of 2021. I've spent most of my life outdoors, hunting, fishing, hiking, all of it. So when my friend Caleb invited me to stay 3 nights at his uncle's mountain cabin near Glacier National Park, I didn't think twice. It sounded perfect. No signal, no people, just trees, cold air, and whiskey beside a fire. The drive up there already felt wrong. The road narrowed into wet gravel, surrounded by thick pine forest. It had rained earlier, and fog clung low between the trees like smoke. Caleb was driving while I watched the woods pass by outside my window. Every few miles, we'd see old abandoned cabins rotting in the hills. About 20 minutes before reaching the cabin, we passed an old gas station that looked shut down for years. But standing outside was a man in a heavy green coat. He stared directly at our truck. Not normal staring either. He didn't blink, didn't move, just watched us pass. Caleb laughed nervously and said, "That guy looks dead already." I laughed too, but something about him stayed in my head. We reached the cabin around 5 p.m. It sat alone on a steep hill overlooking endless forest. No nearby cabins. No lights anywhere. Just us. Inside was old but cozy. Wood stove, dusty furniture, hunting trophies on the walls. Caleb's uncle barely used it anymore. The first night was fine at first. We cooked canned chili, drank beer, and played cards while heavy winds slammed branches against the walls outside. Around midnight, Caleb went to sleep upstairs while I stayed near the fire scrolling through downloaded videos on my phone. That's when I heard footsteps outside. Slow. Crunch. 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 At first I thought it was an animal, but then it stopped directly outside the front porch. I froze. The cabin suddenly felt way too quiet. Then came 3 knocks. Not loud, just calm. Tap, tap, tap. I waited expecting Caleb to come downstairs, but he stayed asleep. Another 3 knocks came. I grabbed a fireplace poker and slowly walked toward the window beside the door. I pulled the curtain back slightly. Nothing. The porch was empty, but the rocking chair out there was moving. Back and forth, back and forth. My stomach dropped. I unlocked the door and stepped outside with a flashlight. The cold air hit hard. The woods were completely black beyond the porch light. No footprints, no person, nothing. I told myself it was wind and went back inside. Around 2 a.m., I finally fell asleep on the couch. Then I woke up to whispering. At first I thought I was dreaming, but no, someone was outside again. I couldn't understand the words, but it sounded like 2 people talking quietly right beside the cabin wall. I sat up slowly. The fire had burned out, and the cabin was freezing cold now. The whispering stopped immediately. Then came footsteps running toward the back of the cabin. Fast. I jumped up and woke Caleb. We grabbed flashlights and checked every window. Nothing. But the back door we found muddy boot prints. Fresh ones. Someone had walked right up to the door. Caleb's face changed after that. He stopped joking around. We barely slept the rest of the night. The next morning we found something worse. Nailed to a tree about 30 yards from the cabin was a dead deer head. Fresh blood still dripped from the neck onto the snow. And tied around one antler was Caleb's red flannel shirt. the same shirt he'd left hanging near the fireplace. Neither of us spoke for a few seconds. That meant someone entered the cabin while we slept. Caleb wanted to leave immediately, but our truck wouldn't start. Battery dead. We tried everything. Nothing worked. And up there was no signal at all. By afternoon, snow started falling heavily. We were stuck. That night we locked every door and window. Caleb kept his hunting rifle beside him while I stayed awake near the front room. At around 11 p.m., we heard movement upstairs. Slow footsteps, but nobody was upstairs. Caleb looked at me pale as hell. The footsteps continued across the ceiling, then stopped directly above us. A loud bang suddenly shook the cabin. Dust fell from the ceiling. Then another bang. Something heavy was moving up there. Caleb chambered around into the rifle and whispered, "Stay behind me." We climbed the stairs slowly. The attic door at the end of the hallway was open. Neither of us remembered opening it. A horrible smell drifted down from the darkness above. Rotting meat. Caleb pointed the flashlight upward, and we saw someone crouching inside the attic. The flashlight hit his face for half a second. Old white male. Thin skin. Long gray beard soaked with something dark. His eyes reflected brightly like an animal's. Then he moved backward into the darkness. Fast. Caleb nearly fired. We backed downstairs immediately and locked ourselves inside the living room. Neither of us knew what to do anymore. The cabin suddenly felt too small. Then we heard laughing above us. Quiet first, then louder, like whoever was up there enjoyed hearing us panic. Caleb yelled, "Get the hell out." The laughing stopped instantly. For the next hour there was silence. No footsteps. Nothing. That silence was worse than the noises. Around 1 a.m., we heard the attic door creak open again upstairs. Then footsteps descended slowly down the hallway. Each step dragged slightly, like the person had an injured leg. The hallway floor creaked closer and closer until the steps stopped right outside the living room door. The doorknob slowly turned. Caleb raised the rifle. The knob stopped moving. Then came a voice. Soft. Old. "I know you boys took my cabin." Neither of us answered. The voice came again. "You should have left yesterday." I could hear breathing on the other side of the door. Heavy breathing. Then scratching. Long, slow scratches across the wood. Caleb finally shouted, "We're armed." The scratching stopped. A few seconds later we heard footsteps walking away toward the kitchen. Then cabinet doors opening. Plates breaking. Silverware crashing onto the floor. He wanted us scared, and it worked. Eventually everything went quiet again. Around 3 a.m. exhaustion hit me hard. I must have drifted off for a few minutes because Caleb suddenly shook me awake. His face looked terrified. He whispered, "He's outside." I looked toward the living room window. A figure stood beyond the glass, perfectly still, watching us. The porch light revealed the same green coat from the gas station. Same man. He slowly lifted one finger to his lips, like he was telling us to stay quiet. Then the cabin lights went out. Complete darkness. Caleb fired one shot through the window. The gunshot exploded through the cabin. Then we heard running outside. Fast footsteps circling the cabin through the snow. Left side. Back side. Roof. Yes, roof. Heavy footsteps moved directly above us. The entire cabin groaned. Then came pounding on the front door. Violent pounding. Boom. 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 The old wood started cracking. Caleb yelled for me to grab the lantern while he reloaded. But before he could chamber another round, the pounding stopped. Silence again. Then we heard the truck engine outside start. Both of us froze. There was no way. The battery had been dead. Headlights suddenly flashed through the windows. The truck slowly backed out of the driveway. Whoever that man was, he had disabled the truck himself, and now he was leaving with it. We ran outside into the snow, but the truck disappeared down the dark mountain road within seconds. We spent the rest of the night trapped in that cabin with no vehicle and no power. Neither of us slept. At sunrise, we hiked nearly 6 miles through snow until we finally reached the highway and flagged down a forestry worker. Police later searched the cabin. They found signs someone had been secretly living in the attic for weeks. Food wrappers, old blankets, animal bones, and dozens of photographs. Pictures of hikers, hunters, tourists, even photos of me and Caleb unloading our truck the first evening we arrived. But the creepiest part came later. An officer showed us an old missing persons report from 1998. The photo matched the man in the green coat exactly. According to records, he vanished in those mountains almost 23 years earlier. They never found him, and they never recovered Caleb's truck either. To this day, I refuse to stay anywhere near isolated mountain cabins, especially in Montana, because sometimes out there deep in those woods, someone may already be living inside before you even arrive.